All right, folks, let's get this thing cranked up. Thank you, everybody, for coming this tonight. So let's call the roll.
Burnett,
Here.
Carter, Neal,
Here.
Pasalakwa, Patterson, Paul, Smeltzer,
Here.
Thorsland,
Here.
Yukon.
Here. I think we've got a quorum, so let's keep moving then. There is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to do that? I see a first by Eric. I see a second by MC. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We have the minutes from July 11th meeting that are attached. Do I have a motion to approve those? Mike Smeltzer makes a motion. Stephanie Burnett makes a second. Is there any questions, discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Public participation. I was given no slips tonight. So I'm looking at no offense, the peanut gallery. I see no slips, no hey, I want to speak. So no public participation tonight. So with that, I have no communication either tonight unless Mary has something for me. Nope, Mary has nothing. So, okay, so we have the results of our interviews. So let me pass this out. This was not shared with you in advance, I would tell you that. This was finalized this afternoon, in fact, so with some minor editing to what was put together over the weekend. So again, you have not seen this, and so don't feel that you've been out of the loop, because you've not been out of the loop. We will walk through this. We'll go line by line on a number of points. So yeah, we'll go through it and make sure we spend enough time on it. So. All right, so you'll notice, first of all, that this is a draft document. This is not a final document. At the top, the beginning, it says in March of 2022. I'm not going to go through that because that really lays out the groundwork for this task force and kind of some items there from the county board, including, kind of what this committee was kind of charged with. And what they were kind of charged with, which is number one, their additional amount of ARPA resources needed to incentive broadband expansion in the upcoming fiscal year from the county board, and two, county executive update on utilization of the 2.8, which is part of the $3 million that was allocated, and county ARPA resources already allocated. So let's stop there a second. Any questions on that very top portion? Okay, that stuff's pretty straightforward. So let's talk about the RFI process, and this will lead into the interviews, and this will lead into the subcommittee that was selected to do the interviews, their recommendation. So the RFI was released on June 10th by Finley on behalf of the county executive to the public, existing broadband providers within the county, and providers expanding broadband infrastructure. I believe it was shared with, if I remember right, I think 12 to 15 broadband companies directly. And of course, it was a public document, so other companies and other individuals could see it. It was really no secret. The deadline for submission was Thursday, July 30th at 4 p.m. That gave those providers about 3 weeks to get their submission together or their proposal together. In the end, we had 9 responses were received and presented to the task force, which we saw at our last meeting. And you can see the date of that, and those were then posted on the county board's website under County Broadband Task Force. The broadband Task Force recommended that 5 of the 9 be interviewed for further exploration. those 5 that were recommended to be interviewed were Frontier Communications, Comcast, Nextlink, VoloNet, and CCG Fiber. Again, that happened at our last meeting. From there, you can see our format for the meetings. The providers were invited to participate in a 1-hour interview. And I will tell you, we kept very consistent with that 1 hour. I don't believe any of them went over an hour meeting with any of them. The interviews were all the same. There were 15-minute presentation by the providers, 30 minutes of the interview questions provided by the interview team. And again, that interview team was myself, Mike Smeltzer, and Mary Ellen from the executive's office, and Tim from Finley served as kind of a consultant's role in that. Then we finished up the interview with 10 minutes of questions from the providers to the interview team. Again, we had a list of questions. I think there were 15 questions, I believe. Each of the interview people, we ended up getting through all of the questions with all of them, with the exception of one. That provider, though, had already submitted written responses to all the questions. So we felt that I think we fell short by 2 or 3 questions. We felt we still had sufficient information from them because they had submitted written responses. So we did get through all of our questions with each of the individual companies that we visited with. Prior to the interview, providers were expected to complete an exercise which entailed completing a condensed yet high-level version of the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program, providing the interview team with some core information as well. So they also provided, again, in addition to the questions we asked, they also provided us a number of documents that we had requested. The last bullet point, and this will get down to the crux of everything tonight. The interview team met 4 times following the interviews to deliberate and decide on the draft recommendations, and those recommendations are as follows. To request additional ARPA funds in the amount of $7 million from the county board, and to request the county executive begin negotiations with VoloNet and Nextlink to receive part of the $3 million ARPA allocation dedicated to broadband to pursue Connect Illinois grant for fiber-related projects. So at the end of the day, to summarize that, our small interview task force is recommending to this task force to support and recommend to the full county board an additional $7 million in funding. That again would be on top of the 3 for a grand total of $10 million that we would request, and that the county executive be instructed to work with Volo and Nextlink as partners moving forward to achieve our goals of getting broadband to the rest of the county. You can see there that the task force will deliberate and submit the recommendation to the county board on August 18th. So that's the goal, at least, I'll put it that way. And that is the request of the executive from the last meeting, that we have that ready for the next meeting, which is, again, this Thursday night.
Brad, one clarification.
Yes.
If a provider wanted to pursue a grant that was directly with the federal government, that was available and appropriate for what we're talking about doing, we didn't preclude that, did we?
I don't think we did, Mike, no.
Okay, so that last part of that could pursue a grant for fiber-related projects. It wouldn't have to be Connect Illinois.
That's correct. It was just that we put fiber in there because that was the general consensus
Absolutely, fiber.
That is the general consensus of our preference was fiber, yes.
Oh, absolutely that. Yeah. Just I believe there are some federal direct grants that are available now or soon to be available that might be appropriate, that might actually be quicker than Connect Illinois.
Right. Okay. So that is our recommendation. That's the process we went through. Again, Mike is here, Mary Ellen is here, Tim is here. We can answer questions. We can discuss this as long as you want. But at this point, that's our recommendation. So before I take questions, Mary Ellen and Mike or Tim, would you like to add anything?
I have nothing to add.
I think the one pager actually lines out the entire process. It was, very methodical and a fair amount of hours spent on behalf from the interview team. And each time along the way, doing touch points with the county executive just for ensuring that, things were moving along as needed. So aside from that, just available, open for questions, but the interview team, guys, congratulations. That was a lot of hours. So you guys you did your homework and you did a lot of inquiry of the providers. So.
All right, questions, comments, discussion. Eric?
Yeah, just a couple of comments, and kind of rolling with Mike there. I think if we're going to make a recommendation to the board, we should pursue fiber-related grants or just pursue grants for connectivity and not just, limit ourselves, as Mike said, to just Connect Illinois grants. We know that this week, the next infrastructure bill with broadband in it's going to get signed. Hopefully we can work to get some of that too, to bolster this up. Right. I want to make sure that when we recommend it to the county board, we want to cast as big a net as possible for matching funds or funds that help defer some of the $7 million even. So.
Yes, and if you have another comment, by all means, Eric. That's just a wording change. We can do that. I think the intent. I think we're all in agreement that you're right. That the federal grants could be a little bit different, but Connect Illinois. Yeah, it's a wording change. We can get that changed, no problem. And I also think you're correct that next round. Let me rephrase that. Not next round, but that infrastructure bill funding that has not been. Well, it's not been given to the states yet. It's not been given to anybody yet. I think there will be some additional funds in there that broadband could qualify for, or will qualify for. But again, we don't know when that'll be, how much it'll be, and how that'll be distributed at this point. At least I'm not aware. I could be out of the loop on that one, but I know they're in the works of trying to figure all that out.
And I think it's a great clarification, Mr. Chairman, that I think it's for those programs that will allow for ARPA resources to be served as match. The other existing program that's active right now on behalf of NTIA is a middle mile program, and the FAQs just came out updated about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks, stipulating that local and state ARPA dollars could not be used as match. So, and I think that was just trying to capture that, but I think generic language, grants would be absolutely appropriate as long as ARPA resources can be used as match.
So I realize that, again, that you haven't seen this, but again, we literally just finished this afternoon, kind of the finishing touches. So all of this is new to most of you this evening, and unfortunately, Mike and I and Mary Ellen and Tim spent, as Tim said, a number of hours going through this, and so we're overly familiar with it. So I want to give each of you the opportunity to let it all kind of sink in of what we did and how we did it and our recommendation, because it was a big decision, and we didn't take that decision lightly as a committee of the impact of our recommendation. I'll put it that way. Darlene, while there is a lull in the discussion a minute, your view would be that this would be a formal motion, first, second, et cetera, and passed by this task force to take it to the full county board Thursday evening. That was, I assume, but I had not talked to you about that as a matter of fact.
So the county board is going to get some materials at their meeting on Thursday to begin to look at the rest of their ARPA funding, which we do have at this point, and they can make a decision about whether to put it in this year's budget, next year's budget, or not allocate it yet, which I don't think is on the table so much. They do have a lot of commitments that they would like to make. I think we're at the point with our ARPA funding, which we're going to begin to have to take choices. And I think we were asked to try to put everything on the table that they might want to consider for next year. So that's why we're in the rush, to get it done by Thursday. And I will say, we do have still this year almost the 3 million. We took some out for Finley, of course. But we do have the rest of that for allocation this year that we could actually negotiate some agreements this year. The board could decide to put more of it into this year if that was useful to get somebody started, or they could allocate it after in the 2023 budget, which would start in January. So there's options, but I think having the discussion and recommendation from this committee is essential to at least getting a ballpark figure and where you'd like to have it go. I think when I spoke with you guys, I don't know if you talked about sort of where the money will go in terms of fiber and laying fiber out to certain places, or we talked about governments, we talked about housing authority, different things like that. So I don't know if you want to get into that much detail about some of those. We're not picking specific projects right at the moment, but all of those things were talked about in terms of just leaving it wide open, like anything related to fiber, but also we realize we can't fund everything, and the board doesn't have enough money to go around to every single thing. So that's where we're at, and that's kind of the direction from this committee, was so that the board had something to start with to be able to say we're still interested in doing more broadband or no.
Thanks, Darlene. And Darlene brings up a good point. One of the things that I think is important, and I will be honest, I left out, so I apologize, of what would the remainder of the 3 million that's been allocated, and then the additional 7 million, what would that be used for? I think that we as a subcommittee, and Mike and Mary Ellen can chime in if they want, there's really, I think, 4 things. That one is fiber in the ground. Would be one thing to install fiber. One of the companies that we're recommending, Volo, did specifically talk about, part of their proposal is to work with the Housing Authority of Champaign County and do some work with them of getting some connectivity to the Housing Authority. The third thing that I would say is to address and get it to some low-income areas within the county. There are low-income residents outside of the city limits that are grant eligible, that I believe both companies are more than willing to address and to get fiber to those residents. Both companies, both NextLink and Volo, then within their proposals, which are sort of separate, which kind of run a different program, do have low-income pricing. I know we've heard a little bit about that in the past. Again, keep in mind that pricing piece is sort of a separate pot that's out there, but I think both of the companies have interest in addressing and getting to some of those low-income residents around the county. It is going to be used to connect to two households, and that when I say that, I mean from the road to the actual house. So not when I say laying fiber, I mean laying fiber along the road, but also taking it from the road to the house is where some of these funds would go. And then the biggest part would be the matching funds. Both of the companies that we're recommending are willing to put skin into the game, and in a matter of fact, they're willing, in their proposals, both companies were willing to put as much in as the county was putting in to match that, to then utilize to get the rest of it through grant funding. So that's really what the funds, the remainder of the 3 million and the extra 7 would go towards. And again, overall, it's connecting the rest of the county to quality broadband that's reliable and that's affordable. So. Mike and Mary Ellen are giving me the thumbs up. That's it.
So Mike, I look to you for your expertise. If I understand it, if we were to take the 3 and the 7 county funds, and Volo and NextLink are willing to sort of match that, that gets us in the 20. And then if we get all that matched through possible grants, then maybe we're in the 40. Are we getting things done?
My ability to do math in my head is diminished, but yes, I believe we're anticipating a minimum of a 70-30 split between Illinois, Connect Illinois funds and local funds. So 30% works backwards if that's really, it's a little less than 20 million, maybe 19 or so. 19 is 30% of about 52, 53, something. I could calculate it, but whatever that is. Based on Finley's numbers, that's enough to do fiber everywhere as long as the RDOF funding that NextLink has already applied for comes through. It's real close, but it's enough. If the RDOF funding for NextLink doesn't come through, there's another, it's almost 14 million worth of construction that would need to be done to do the rest of the county. And then we're going to be a little short. Now, it's possible that the state of Illinois will say, okay, we're willing to live with an 80-20 split, in which case what we have probably would be fine for 20% of what needs to be done. But in the scoring, the way the state is planning on doing that and where they've already announced in their previous projects, the higher your percentage of local match, the better your score, at least for that part of the evaluation. So we run a risk of not getting funded at all if we ask for too aggressive or too low of a local match. So 7 million gets it done and maybe gives us a little cushion. And, you know, if it's too much, I'm sure there are projects that the county board won't fund either at all, but are lined up kind of like the wait list, if you will. And if this project had $1 million to give back, that'd be great. And I'm sure there are a variety of organizations that would appreciate that. But I think 7 about as low as we can go and feel comfortable, and for the providers to feel comfortable that they're going to invest in this first wave and that there's going to be a second wave. If I were running well, I'll be president of Volo for a second. That'll, there's people throwing up. There's people throwing up over there. If I was president of Volo, I would kind of like to hear the county board say, yes, we're going to dedicate the full 10 million, 7 million additional, so that they know that the next wave of money is coming. So they can plan the whole thing and plan on executing, come up with a timeline for what gets done when and so forth that makes sense. Right now, they're only dealing with 2.8 and probably more like 1.4 because the two companies are splitting the territory. So I think it's important that you're I guess our token representative of the county board today. It's important for the board for this project, if the board prioritizes this project, to set aside the money and to do it now. Otherwise, these guys may say, wait a minute, why are we going to get started on a $20 million project if we're only going to get a third of the money? They would be very much within their rights or their sensibilities to be very cautious about that.
But it's also an opportunity, I think, with the allocation that's currently in front of us, the 3 million that's been done. It gives the pilot of the partnerships of both of them, because just as Mike said it very well, each are starting a new partnership. And if it goes well on both fronts, then additional conversations and opportunities exist when next opportunities of funding come down the road. But you know, that is a TBD because that hasn't happened yet. So what's in front of you is the 3 million and the relationship to start with that and to see how it goes, and then make an assessment as those projects commence or project areas commence based on what the providers present to the county executive. So
if the county board is truly going to be dividing next year's ARPA funds Thursday night, and we need a stake in the ground for broadband, that's a $7 million stake. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody because Finley told us it was going to cost that much a long time ago. I used to say it was going to cost more than that. The 70-30 split was not always what the state of Illinois was doing. The state used to be doing 50-50 splits. So for them to get to a 70-30 is progress. So it's kind of going to be in the county board's court if they really want this project to go forward. And that's why we vote.
It was only back in March, Mike. It was only back in March.
Okay.
Well, I can't speak for the board as one of 22, but I know that this is one of the consensus items that the board has talked about from the beginning. I think we thought at first that, the request to do this was going to be all of the ARPA money. So, 25% of it is not a shocking amount. Some of the questions maybe I anticipate that they're going to ask is, will this get it done if the RDOF drops out? There's this nebulous broadband is in the Inflation Reduction Act that's yet to be signed, but I assume it will be signed. But we don't know any details about that. Is that something that maybe, in past experience, Finley might know that when that money gets out there, is it going to fill in places that if we're 2 years out from now and everything gets more expensive and we're 80% finished with what we want to do and we kind of peter out of all the money that we could get and the matching funds, maybe then those holes are going to be prioritized by that federal dollars that, will come out, and we might be looking to you guys to help us negotiate that a couple of years from now. We'll see. But I think there's a good case to make to the board to try to, do this. Everyone wants to do it right. I'm not sure that we will allocate all the rest of the ARPA money on Thursday night. I think the budget process is greasy and slimy and it's slippery, and it takes a while for everyone to get through it. We're still working on things like the money for water projects in the urban districts and how we're going to do that. And I think Thursday night there'll be a lot of things on the plate, but I hope that this proceeds forward.
And Eric, to follow up on your statement about the remaining areas that have yet to be the hardest of the hard, let's just call it that. Well, with Illinois' Connect Illinois program defining highly unserved and unserved by the BEAD fundings that will eventually hit sometime in 2023, potentially 2024, it stipulates to the states that they must get as much done in their unserved areas first before they can go to underserved. And so they're basically targeting, say, do your hardest of the hard first, and hopefully that actually will help the underserved later. But that is a directive. Now, how the states interpret that and make that into action is TBD. So.
Eric, I just played with my calculator. If RDOF fell apart and we just had the roughly 19.5 million in terms of our local match, that still gets us up to 78 million total with a 25% match. So we wouldn't have to drop all the way down to 20. We'd lose some points going from 30 to 25, but we're still at, and we probably don't even need 78. So it'll be some number, 26, 27, somewhere in there. And that'll have to be the best we can do.
It's oddly close to the original number you laid on our table, I think, way back then, of $80 million. So you're either brilliant or damn lucky, but I'm going with brilliant. So.
MC or Stephanie, any questions? How's it hit you? Any comments of wow or interesting or?
Nothing from me, sir.
I mean, I'm pleased with the outcome based on
what I know about the situation. I guess my only question is, how will they divide the territories? How would that work?
You know, we've talked about that some as a committee, and really that's up to that next step as for if this continues to move through and is funded, that's really the next step for the county executive to negotiate of how that would happen. I really don't know. We've not broached that subject with any of the companies that we interviewed of a split. Our only communication or only reference to that was we asked each and every company if the county selected more than one provider to do this project, would they be willing to partner? And all 5 of them that we interviewed said yes. But Stephanie, my comment is that's the next step, and that would be up to the county executive to negotiate that and to work with the companies if it's selected and our recommendation is accepted. Yes, Mike.
The zones that Finley created back when they were doing the RFQ, they split kind of naturally on either an east-west axis with 3 on the east and 3 on the west, or a north-south axis with 3 in the north and 3 in the south. We will have some math available soon that shows the number of residences in each of those splitting scenarios and what Finley's estimated costs were, but they're probably going to come up pretty close to 50-50. But that would seem to be the logical way to do it. There is efficiency for the providers in having a contiguous area. You wouldn't want one provider to be working on the northwest quadrant and the southeast quadrant at the same time, because then their fiber doesn't connect to each other. So they'd probably go north-south or east-west, but that's...
And just as additional follow-up, because many of the grant programs have caps on them of how much grants you can ask for, you know, what will end up happening, and this is what the public-private partnerships happen is, you know, the providers will create proposed project areas. They may be within a sector or sectors. They may not. They may overlap, you know, multiple. What's contingent on what's conducive for the business model for the provider, if you will. But it's going to max out at a certain point. They can't cover everywhere, so it's going to have to come in stages because this is an expensive venture to do. So with that, they'll look at the program. And that's partly why the team wanted to put them through the Connect Illinois exercise to get them used to what a Connect Illinois grant program is going to ask of them. But they'll put that project area together, and I think the core discussion amongst the team is to ultimately not have overlap, to make sure that if there's 2 entities proposing 2 applications, let's just use Connect Illinois as a hypothetical, to ensure that there's not overlap, that there's not double funding going on in that territory, to make sure that you're hitting different areas of the county. So as long as they're grant eligible areas in that unserved, underserved categories. So
What else from the task force for tonight? You will see, I guess maybe I didn't say it, that it's not a bullet point, but it's after the last bullet point that Darlene and it would be Darlene and I who present this to the county board. Darlene's looking at me. I think she's intending it for me to be me on Thursday evening. So just to be clear on that. So it'll be me. Other questions or comments? Do I have a motion then to accept our recommendation? Mike makes a motion. Is there a second? Oh, correct. Tim's got it. Mary, can you?
I think basically you just took out the words a Contact Illinois grant and just put pursue grants for fiber-related projects.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was getting ready to ask Mary if she could accept that as a motion without. Okay. So before I accept a second, does everybody understand what Mike was motioning? There's some minor word changes which Darlene just clarified on that Eric brought to our attention. So
Yeah, I'll second that with those changes.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Would you like to discuss the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Is there any other business to come before the meeting tonight? I have no chair's report. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.